You're listening to Real Facts on Real Estate with Sean Patrick Maloney.
That sounds good.
Welcome to episode 35, Radon for Real Estate Professionals. I'm your host, Sean Patrick Maloney. I want to talk to you this week about radon. Radon is something that's in the environment naturally, and constantly real estate agents are running into whether they should test for radon or not. Almost every single real estate transaction now, it's one of the questions that comes up during the making an offer process, as well as reviewing the offer. Are the buyers going to have the radon test done or not? Often as real estate professionals, we're asked questions that we can't actually answer because we're not professionals. While this podcast is going to give you a lot of advice on radon, I obviously can't advise you one way or the other. My best advice to you is whenever someone asks whether they should test or not, is to either tell them to ask a professional in the testing facilities side of things, or to just say yes, because to say no puts you at risk of there being an issue. So when in fear, always test, because the reality is testing is better than not testing, and giving advice to not test only to have the test come up as a positive reading after the fact of a closing can lead to troubles with your errors and omissions insurance and other problems. So first off, what is radon? Radon's an odorless, colorless, tasteless gas that's radioactive. And why is it there? It's actually there from the radioactive breakdown of uranium in indigenous rock and soil. It also can be in the water. So a lot of people don't realize that one when I said in the water. It actually sticks in the water on the atomic level, and it's able to be within the drinking water of well water. So it is something that they do test water for, as well as they test the air. Most commonly, the places that they test would be the basement, or if it's a slab foundation, the first floor. But the lowest level of the living area is the most common place. It's blamed for about 20,000 deaths per year by the CDC. It's also known as the second leading cause of lung cancer by the CDC. A lot of people argue whether it's real or not. A lot of people have their opinions on it, or whether, my parents were a cellar dweller all the way to I spend a lot of hours down there. But the truth is, a lot of people have cancer. No one knows why, as far as other than the leading medical professionals give us diagnoses why. But a lot of times when something's odorless, colorless, scentless, tasteless, the whole thing, we just don't really want to accept it. Like, this invisible thing can't possibly be hurting me. But the reality is the professionals can agree that 20,000 deaths plus the second leading cause of cancer for lung cancer, it's pretty believable. So definitely don't be running your opinion to clients. That's one of the first things that I want to express is your opinion doesn't count, because when you voice your opinion, you can get yourself in trouble. So next, let's go over what is an acceptable reading. So there's lots of different reading strategies. We'll go over those in a minute, but it's 7 picocuries per liter. What that is exactly, I don't know. That's why they have tests and they send you back the results. All you need to know is you need to have below 4 picocuries per liter, which in relation to what is that on a radioactive level, that's 35 times more radioactive than the fence at a radioactive waste site per the CDC. So what that means is it's actually a pretty high level of radiation. Now remember, a lot of times the radioactive sites, they're very particular about any release of it, so they do have stringent guidelines, but I'm going to say that, something 35 times more radioactive than the fence at a radioactive waste site, I don't know that I want that in my basement with my kids playing down there or anybody else in the family down there. So it's definitely something that shouldn't be taken lightly. And then here's another stat for you that was really surprising to me, and it's because a lot of schools sit on slab foundations around rock. A student that spends 180 days, 8 hours a day, exposed to radon gas has been exposed to 10 times more radiation than the Nuclear Regulatory Commission allows at the edge of a power plant that's on nuclear power. So I know everyone drives by a nuclear power plant and they think, oh my God, I hope I didn't get radiation and everything like that. Yet we have people going to school, we have people hanging out in basements or other places like that where they're at a level of 10 times that. And now these numbers were taken from radon.com or another website like that talks about radon. So I am citing numbers that they're giving me, so I apologize if their numbers are off at all, but I can tell you that most of this was taken from the CDC or the U.S. Health Department and many other places like that. So one of the big things to remember with radon gas is it's something that where we can't see it and we don't respect it, sometimes people expose themselves to it. And the thing is, the cost is really not that high to fix it, especially if you do the fixing yourself. So one thing to think about with it is because of the size of the atoms is so low, it actually passes through gypsum, which is similar to wallboard, goes through concrete block, it can go through paint, it can go through most insulations, it can go through wood, it can go through wood paneling. So again, with this type of thing, it's almost like ghosts. Are there ghosts or are there not? You prove it to me that there's not, and I'll believe you. But also, I don't know that I believe you that there are, because I've never seen one, and I've never felt one. I've never seen one pass through a wall, but supposedly they pass through walls. So maybe radon comes from ghosts. Who knows? Just kidding. But anyways, radon being odorless, colorless, tasteless, passing through walls, a lot of these concepts to us as human beings, they're very difficult to understand. So sometimes we think, well, there's no way it got into here. There's no way that it actually made it here. The reality is it falls into low spots and gets trapped in those low spots and builds up. So again, I went over, it's the breakdown of uranium that's found in rock and soil, as well as it can fall into the water. And because of its atomic size, it sticks into the water particles. So it's really important to remember that not only can you end up breathing it in, but you end up ingesting it. So a lot of people will build up a high level of radon in their body through drinking well water that hasn't been tested for radon. Remember, when buying a home with well water, you really should have them tested, and even some banks actually require you to have the well water tested, as well as some towns and counties will end up having you have it tested. Radon is not forced to be tested for, but you can request any type of test you want. So I would say you definitely want to reach out and get that radon test done as well. Radon testing, as far as air quality testing, also is not required in any states yet, but I've heard from some places they actually require radon testing with the new build. So with new build, some of the newest homes are coming with radon mitigation systems already installed, and that's a really good thing, but it's also something that's telling me that when buying or selling a home right now, you may want to have it tested, because the reality is there's a good potential that in the future this could be a standardized test. And if you're buying or selling a home in the future that you had before, you may end up having to pay for a radon mitigation system for somebody else. So that's something you really don't want to get stuck with. But again, like I said earlier, depends on the level of radon, but they can be as inexpensive as $500 if you do it yourself, all the way up to multiple thousands of dollars if it's a major problem and there has to be some serious mitigation done. So it is something you should be aware of. Let's talk a little bit about the testing. So the testing is commonly offered by home inspectors. The home inspectors have many different ways of testing. Most commonly, you see them open either canisters or little vials, and you put them out for 48 hours. Up to 96 hours. Over 96, the test expires, so don't let that happen. But 48 hours later, the test can be collected. You screw the caps back on, fill out the information, put it in the self-addressed envelope, and send it back. One thing I've learned is sometimes these envelopes go missing. So one of the things I always suggest is take a picture of each one of the vials, which has a number on it. Take a picture of the information sheet you filled out, as well as take a picture of the outside box, which typically has a tracking number on it. That way, if it goes missing, you have a higher likelihood of being able to track it down, as well as if the test site actually loses the information sheet in there, when you call in, you know the vial numbers or the tube numbers, and you're able to talk with them and get your results back. Some of the new, more modern ways of testing is actually an electronic little system that actually takes the air and tests it right there and gives you a readout right away. It's a lot quicker than this 48-hour system. But some things to remember. If you're representing a seller and you have a test kit in the basement by a buyer, first off, you can't return that test kit for them. You need the buyer or the buyer's agent to come back, because otherwise you could have compromised the results. And if you do that, you risk that in the future there could be a lawsuit involved with that they think you tampered with the results. So you always want to require them to come back and get it. And as a buyer's side, you want to make sure you get it, because you don't want to know that they didn't tamper with your results. There'll be a little door knocker that'll be hung in the house reminding people to leave all the windows, doors, air conditionings, and outside airs off. Now, this is something people commonly think that they're going to spoof the test. They're going to mess with the test by opening windows, and that's going to let the radon out, and that's going to cause them a better result. reality is, I've actually learned from people in radon testing that sometimes opening the wrong windows or doors can actually lead to a vacuum effect, creating more radon, pulling it into the foundation and into the basement, giving you a false positive. So the people going for a false negative and thinking, oh my God, I don't want to get caught with the radon that's down there or could be down there, even though they're not sure if it's down there. So then they go and open the doors and windows thinking, okay, I'll let the house breathe. And in reality, they could be failing their own test. So the best thing you can do is sit back, relax, and hope for good luck and not go and try to play with the test. The test is something that, again, also, if you're altering it, I imagine there may be some legal recourse if you're changing somebody's radon test, because this is a real gas that causes real problems and shouldn't be taken lightly. I know a lot of people do take it lightly, and it's something that when we hear about it again, because of the fact that it's odorless, scentless, tasteless, it's hard to understand, but make sure they respect that test kit while it's down there. And if you're the one picking up the test kit, make sure you fill everything out before you send the card in. I told you to take a photo of it, but I didn't remind you to make sure you fill out every box. Make sure the thing is completed, because the last thing you want to do is get a rejection. God forbid you get a rejection. It's really difficult because typically we're already in an offer that stipulates when we're going to be getting into a purchase and sale agreement. And because of the fact that the radon test takes so long to do, takes so long in the mail, chances are you may end up, because of the first one not going through, need to sign a PNS before the actual radon results are back, which can do a couple of things. One, it can cost a little more money to the buyer and seller because of the fact that their attorneys need to now alter the PNS. Two, it can really take away a lot of the negotiating power of the buyer because the seller feels like they're this far along. Chances are they don't want to drop chase over this radon test. And three, it can cause a lot of unnecessary arguments between the buyer and seller because the seller's like, what the heck? I just want this test out of the way. We've been in this testing period. We already gave you time. And the buyer be like, hey, what the heck? I really want to know. I didn't lose the radon kit. It got lost in the mail and stuff. So when you do have a kit go bad, or you do have a kit that does get lost in the mail, what you want to do is make sure that you overnight the next kit or personally drive it to the facility. They do offer radon kits at Home Depot and Lowe's. I don't suggest typically offering to do them that way for clients. I only suggest this in an emergency type situation because it does place a little bit of liability on us. So definitely only do those radon kits if you have to really go grab one at Lowe's, put it in that day and mail it out. But most likely you'll be able to get a hold of a home inspector that'll be able to hand you off a kit. You may drive and meet with them to get it or whatever works out best. But remember, most of these testing facilities are actually very localized. One of them for us in the state of Massachusetts is right over west of Boston, about 30 minutes. So not a far drive for most everybody in the state to get it over there, especially when you look at overnighting a package costing somewhere in the high 20s, and driving there will take you less than an hour. So make sure if you do have one go wrong that you go and deal with it right away, because you want to get it put to bed and you want to get that PNS signed clean, ready to go, and you don't want to be dealing with arguments later. So now let's talk about what happens if you get a negative reading. If you get a negative reading, there's a lot of different radon mitigation systems. I'm not an expert at radon mitigation systems, but the different types that I've seen all pretty much do the exact same thing. It's all about air circulation and getting the radon gas out of the air and exchanging it with fresh air. So the typical system that you'll see, a company comes, just like a sump pump, they cut a hole in the basement foundation. And when they do that, they install a pump down there, and then they caulk and silicone down around it. They also go around and caulk and silicone all cracks and holes in the foundation, closing down any way in or out, including over the sump pump and lots of other areas like that. They want to have as little of airflow from outside that foundation, behind the foundation, in as possible. Now, once they do that, this little fan acts like a vacuum, and it ends up pushing the air up with this little PVC pipe. It goes around a corner, which I believe is full of liquid so that it can't backflow. It goes around that corner and up and out of the house. What this does is it sucks all the air around the foundation out and blows it up into the natural environment and allows new fresh air to come back in. On the side of it, you'll notice something that looks just like what you would think of for an old school thermometer with the red liquid inside, and that's going to tell you how much suction you have. So when you look at it, it actually has a little reading line on the side of it, and it tells you how many pounds of vacuum it's creating. And that's why it's important for them to seal those other cracks, is so that it can create that vacuum and it can pull those gases out from underneath the house, put them out, and have it be fresh, clean air. So when we're talking about who pays for it, most typically it's on the seller. Now, some of sellers' agents like to argue everything to the hilt, and they try to do things, but the reality is, if the buyer walks away, it's now a known material defect, and you're going to have to disclose it to the next party. So if you want to play that game of arguing, and it does lead to a breakdown of communication, it could lead to a breakdown of communication, a price drop, and doing it. So more than likely, best bet is to just do it, or to agree to a number where you agree maybe to half of it or whatever. It really depends on what your original offer was, as far as did they already beat you up on the offer, or you're already way down low compared to what you want. And again, everything's situational, but remember, like all known material defects, once you have one, you have to disclose it. So it is something where you want to make sure you explain to your sellers that, hey, if we play this game, are we ready to have them walk away, and are we ready to take it on? Because I can be honest with you, I said it at the beginning of the podcast, I'll reiterate it now, it's something that's becoming more and more common and more pressing. So by turning your back to it or not paying attention to it, it doesn't mean the next person won't. And a lot of sellers say, well, I've stayed here all this time and I'm not sick. You don't need to remind them that they probably just don't know that they're sick yet. But the reality is that doesn't matter to the future generation. The future generation that owns the home is more aware than ever, because they're being educated by the government and other people about the health hazards that are involved in this, and they actually want to protect their families. And you got to understand that anyone who's thinking about finishing the basement more than likely is going to want to know that they have a clean reading, so that they know they're not exposing their family and loved ones. Because again, with 20,000 deaths and the second leading cause of lung cancer, it's a pretty serious thing. And as you can see, it's probably going to become a standardized testing. So just keep that in mind when you're actually working your way through the deal. Well, I hope this helps you understand radon a little better and helps you work your job as a real estate professional better. Remember, I'm not a radon expert. I grabbed all this stuff online through trusted sources. But do remember, don't be a radon expert. Just know that when people are asking should they test or should they not test, it is an important test to have done. We can't tell them whether to do anything or not do it, but when people ask, you better to say yes than no, because at least that way they know it's clean and they get a good rating, or if it isn't clean, it's been dealt with, versus you giving them advice to not do it. Make sure to be safe out there. Make sure to take care of your clients. If you're not already a member, make sure to join our group in Facebook, Real Facts on Real Estate, as well as make sure to subscribe to this podcast. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can email me, PM me, DM me, text me, whatever works best. I look forward to talking to you next week. Have a great week.